You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and time once again, we are making picks for this time week number 8 of the UFL. 4 games on tap, as we have every single week, as the playoffs are just about settled. We have the Brahmas trying to work their way in there and battle their way to the final playoff spot in the XFL. The USFL side has been set and is ready to go, but there's plenty to discuss. Comment down below. Let me hear your picks for this week. What are your thoughts on this week's matchups? I'm currently riding an 11-1 heater over the last 3 weeks right now, having only picked 1 game wrong. But just a reminder, I'm not a gambling guy. I'm not making betting advice. I am breaking down games and talking some football because that is what I love to do. If you are betting along with who I'm picking for just straight up winners, you're nuts because that's not what I'm doing, but I hope it's going well for you because it should have the last few weeks at the very least. Now, diving into our first matchup, we are looking at the Memphis Showboats heading in to take on the Michigan Panthers. This one here, 4 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday on Fox. The Panthers coming in, they have to stay hot with their approach coming up quickly in a clash against the Birmingham Stallions in the playoffs. This could be a bit of a trap game here as the Showboats, worst team in the UFL right now, as far as I would say just about everyone is concerned now. I've been saying that for over a month, but I'm glad everyone's kind of catching up with it. Luckily, Memphis has not had much success doing really anything this season. It's just been a struggle for pretty much the vast majority of the year. Michigan's defensive front in this one could wind up feasting in this game here. Memphis has allowed 32 sacks this season, which leads the league by 11. So if there was ever a game to see some of those guys up front, guys like Breland Speaks, there could be a serious case of just sack city going on over there. But that being said, coupled with the fact that Memphis on top of that can't really run the football, I think that just overall this defensive front is probably going to have themselves a really good game. A lot of tackles for loss, a lot of sacks, a lot of pressure. This one could be a very scary one for those in Memphis. There will be a couple of noteworthy players absent from this defense, so that is something worth keeping an eye on though, as both safety Kai Nakua and Noah Dawkins are listed as inactive there. So just keep that in mind. But overall, I think this is going to be a fun game for Michigan defensively. On the offensive side of things, quarterback health and play has kind of been the big concern. It sounds like Danny Etling is going to be good to go, though. However, Memphis is the worst passing defense in the UFL and also tied for the least amount of sacks. They're not great when it comes to generating pressure, and they only have 2 interceptions this season as well, which is second lowest in the UFL. You could see a nice uptick in quarterback play from Danny Etling, or if for whatever reason he has to step out, as it kind of feels like is the case with quarterbacks over there in Michigan, whoever winds up being under center, I think has a pretty strong game for Michigan, all things considered, with the way this Memphis Showboats defense has been. But overall, I think we're going to see a good game from the Panthers from the offensive side to the defensive side. It just feels like when you look at all the numbers and how things kind of match up, this should be a good one for them. And I also anticipate, with just, the concern surrounding quarterback play at times, watch them lean into Wes Hills and Matt Colburn in this one here, because I think the running back room has been on fire as of late for Michigan. For the Showboats, Case Cookus back as quarterback 1, and now Josh Love set to be his backup quarterback. I know I've seen some people talking about it. This could potentially be the return of Josh Love in spring football. Just keep those eyes peeled if things get ugly for Memphis here. With their inability to protect the quarterback being kind of the biggest downfall here, I don't really know how well they're going to hold up against Michigan, as they are 3rd in sacks this season with 17. So if they can't slow them down, it's going to be another long 60 minutes for Memphis here offensively. And I honestly have no idea how they plan on running the football, as they are one of the worst, if not, I think they're the second worst running offense in the UFL right now. And with Michigan being ranked number 2 against the run, Memphis is going to need players to step up big time, both through the passing game and on the ground as well, if they want to have any sort of success against this Michigan defense. And when you look at the defensive side of things, there's really not a lot to love about what Memphis has done, and you couple that with the fact that you have a total of 5 players from the defensive side of the football listed as inactive for this game, and that includes linebacker Malik Lowell. You have yourself a bit of a pickle if you are the Memphis Showboats here. And as the only team to have over 200 points allowed this season, I'm not expecting a whole lot to change. And with all that being said, I'm not really high on Memphis in this matchup here. Again, it is kind of a trap game for Michigan, but I do think the Panthers come in. They have themselves a nice, healthy performance, a good victory as they work their way towards the USFL side of the playoff bracket. And I think they get a nice, comfortable win, 27-16 over the Memphis Showboats. Looking at our second game of the weekend, this time late game here, 8 p.m. Eastern time. This one's on ESPN2. Not really thrilled that that's going to be the case here, but what are you going to do? The Roughnecks heading into Birmingham to take on the Stallions, as the Roughnecks, just 1-6, have to deal with their USFL division rival, undefeated on a absolute heater monster run, terrorizing spring football leagues over the last 3 seasons. The Birmingham Stallions, yes, give them all the glory they deserve. The big question, can Houston just slow down Birmingham? I think it's as simple as that when you look at the way things are right now in this matchup here. With Birmingham far and away the best rushing attack in the UFL, this will be a test for their run defense, as they are ranked 3rd, allowing about 80 yards per game, and only Michigan and Birmingham being the 2 better run defenses here. I do think that there is a lot of credit that needs to be given to this Roughnecks defense for keeping this team in it basically week in and week out, despite just the offensive inefficiencies that we've been seeing from the other side of the football there in Houston. I will say it's worth mentioning, linebacker Reuben Foster and defensive tackle, Tony Johnson are inactive for this game here. So a couple of tough blows for this defense and a little bit of cause for concern for, again, what is a 3rd-ranked run defense here, missing 2 important guys there in the rotation. I'm also worried about this offense as Houston, and I kind of called this the week prior during picks last week, as I thought that there was a possibility going up against San Antonio that Houston could find themselves still under 100 points scored after last week, and here they are at 97 points. So as the only team left that is still under 100 points scored, there is definitely some concerns going up against a Birmingham defense that is arguably the best in the UFL, with the worst rushing offense and the 2nd worst 3rd down team in the UFL, and they have the most attempts out of anyone, and they're averaging about 7.5 penalties per game on offense, which is the most in the league. It's going to be up to the defense once again, in my opinion, to try to keep this game close. And the first time these 2 teams matched up, it was 32-9. They could not get the job done, and I don't really blame them, all things considered, just with the way things have shook out for them. But it's going to be a tough one for Houston. On the Stallion side of things, it really is just simply a matter of not looking ahead. Don't look past your opponent. Focus on the task at hand, the whole 1-0 every single week type of mentality. That's really the biggest thing for Birmingham here, is just do not start looking towards the playoffs before you actually get there. They held to Houston to just 36 yards on 14 rushing attempts, and Reed Sinnett did throw for about 200 yards, but he also averaged only like 5.3 yards per attempt. There was a lot of completions involved in that, getting to that 200-yard mark. It is worth noting, though, defensively, we're going to be seeing both Carlos Davis, the nose tackle, and cornerback Mark Gilbert not playing in this game here. Mark Gilbert leading the team with 9 tackles the first time these 2 teams played. So a couple of notable key players for that defense inactive this week, so just keep an eye on who fills in for them. Could be some spots maybe that we see Houston try to attack. And also be interested in seeing how much pressure Birmingham is able to generate in this matchup here. There wasn't a ton of pressure on Reed Sinnett. Again, maybe it could have been the dinking and dunking, whatever you really want to say, but they only had 1 sack in game 1 the first time these 2 teams played. So I will be interested in seeing if they're able to generate a little bit more and just really wreak some havoc, especially with the defense feeling like they've kind of rounded out into their true form at this point in the season, even with some of the injuries considered. Offensively, Adrian Martinez did a lot of heavy lifting in that first matchup that they played. He totaled for 293 yards and a touchdown altogether between through the air and with his legs. 138 of those yards at an average of 15.3 yards per rush were with his legs. So I do expect to see a bit of another Adrian Martinez show here, if not maybe even a little bit more, with just how much I feel like he's even reined in further with the offense, and he's really pushing the limits now of what this Birmingham offense can do. I would not be surprised if we see those numbers numbers explode a little bit higher this week, especially just considering where these teams are right now and the motivation factor of the season being done for one side as the other team wants to maintain their dominance. But I would say that I would like to see Martinez test the secondary a little bit more. He only had 20 passing attempts in that first game here, so I want to see him throw the football a little bit more. I love watching him do what he does with his legs, but let me just see you guys test that secondary. It's not necessarily one of the most threatening in the UFL by any means, so let me see what you guys can do. Overall, though, I would be hard-pressed to not be going with the Birmingham Stallions in this matchup here for the W. I have them winning 29-12. I think maybe a little bit of a tighter effort than the first time around, but I mean, you've got to be a crazy gambling man or woman to want to take a bet and go after the Houston Roughnecks for a W this week. And I don't know what the spreads are. I've had a few of you reach out to me saying that you're having a hard time finding the spreads. I don't check any of that stuff. I don't know if they're out and listed yet. Maybe they've been waiting for inactives. I don't know. But whatever the spread is, it's probably not big enough for Birmingham's end. So just keep that in mind as far as thoughts are concerned there. But overall, I do like the Birmingham Stallions. I think they get themselves another good victory and move on to 8-0. Now, moving into Sunday's matchups here, we have the DC Defenders heading into St. Louis to take on the Battlehawks. The Battlehawks 5-2, coming off a tough loss against the Birmingham Stallions last week, and the Defenders teetering on playoff hopes, but they're going to need a lot to fall their way if they want to get in, but they are still in the fight. The Battlehawks, with A.J. McCarron suffering an injury to his ankle last week, definitely have some concerns. And on top of that, I think the concerns got a little bit bigger in the last day when we saw St. Louis bring in Ball State quarterback Drew Plitt to help fill out the roster a little bit here. Luckily for St. Louis, in the event that A.J. McCarron cannot play, the Defenders have struggled mightily all season long on defense. Whether it's against the run or against the pass, they have not been great. And I expect that this running back room in St. Louis, especially with Jacob Sailors leading the way, wind up pushing the attempt numbers a little bit higher to conserve, just take care of the football, play a little bit more conservative, a little more safer if it's not A.J. McCarron, that is, and probably push well over the 100-yard rushing mark, whoever it winds up being, whether it's Sailors alone or maybe a committee kind of setup, whatever they opt to do there. I expect the running backs to see a lot of action this week. On the defensive side of things, I'm expecting St. Louis to be fine in this game here. Cornerback Brandon Sebastian was placed on IR just the other day, so that is a little bit of a blow for a secondary that has been very good this year, but I'm not going to sit here and worry about the defense falling apart. Like, this is the best passing defense in the UFL, allowing only 45 yards per game. They're second in interceptions with 6 on the year. They've only allowed 7 passing touchdowns all season, which is the second lowest in the league. They're still a great unit. And with the way things look in DC, there is a good chance that even minus A.J. McCarron, this is still a fairly comfortable win for St. Louis, because coming into this matchup here on DC's end, they are in rough shape. And of the 9 players that are currently listed on their injury report for practice this week, only one person was a full participant as of the end of day on Thursday. So they are in a tough spot in this matchup, and the numbers are not great for this defense. They are 6th against the pass. They are the worst run defense in the UFL. They've allowed the 3rd most points of the entire league this year, all across the board. DC, aside from like a singular good game, has just been downright abysmal to watch on the defensive side of things. So even minus A.J. McCarron, I do think that St. Louis is still in good shape if they opt to let him rest, because St. Louis is, of course, in the playoffs. So they're good. They're ready to roll. It's just a matter of, do they opt to maybe give McCarron the rest for a week, or they try to, shut down the Defenders' season here and now with a victory? It'll be interested to see kind of what happens there. DC will need to cross their fingers and hope that A.J. McCarron's not playing if they do want to come away with a victory here. The only other thing that is kind of running through my mind as I'm saying this right now is it would be kind of a wild idea for St. Louis to purposely not start A.J. McCarron and maybe lose this game on purpose, considering their playoff spot is solidified, in hopes that maybe the Brahmas drop this week and then DC gets a win and then things get a lot tighter as for who they could face. Because I would think St. Louis probably a little bit more inclined to maybe play DC in the playoffs than San Antonio, but that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. So just something to think about there. Offensively, though, there is a good chance it's not Jordan Teamu for the Defenders this week, and that is obviously an issue for them. It'll be up to either Mike DeLay, I believe it is Dilioleo. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce that. There's a lot of I's and L's in there, so pardon me if I'm butchering that, which I probably am. And then, of course, Jalen McClendon. One of these two guys is going to have to lead this second worst passing attack in the UFL to maybe a somewhat solid performance against, again, the league's best passing defense, at least statistically speaking. And then on top of that, a team that hasn't been able to run the football, maybe they lean into that a little bit more, especially if Te'amu doesn't end up playing. For what it's worth, you can run the football against St. Louis. They have allowed the second most rushing touchdowns this season. They're fourth most in yards per game allowed, fourth most in yards per attempt. So they're about an average to maybe even like a hair slightly below average against the run. So there is an opportunity for the defenders to maybe capitalize there. But again, all things considered, there's some certain things that really need to happen for DC to come away victorious in this matchup here. And again, unless St. Louis wants to drop this game on purpose to give DC a better shot at the playoffs in hopes that maybe San Antonio loses this week as well. But at the same time, you don't want San Antonio to win, you know, jump over you for a playoff or positioning within the playoffs and have to go into San Antonio. So like, while that is an option there, I don't really think that's a realistic possibility. I know, obviously, you're probably listening to me saying that before and you're like, well, Ethan, you just said, I know. It's a thought. Do I think it's going to actually be the case? Probably not, but I do think it's a fun idea to spin around, you know? Overall, though, I do like the Battlehawks in this matchup here, and I do think they get the victory. I have them winning 22-11. I just feel like the defenders' offense is probably going to fall fairly flat in this game here, especially if it's not Jordan Te'amu under center. There's just been way too many things going wrong for DC, both offensively and defensively, and with a massive injury report that they've been dealing with all this week, they're just way too unhealthy and in really rough shape, in my opinion, to take down what is a far better roster and team overall than St. Louis. That being said, final game of the weekend now, we are looking at Arlington as they head into San Antonio to take on the Brahmas. This game will be at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. The Renegades coming off a bit of an offensive explosion last week as they, I believe, now have the most points scored this season at, what was it 47 they put up on the Showboats? It was a ridiculous number there. Their first W of the season, and now they're looking to make it 2 in a row against a San Antonio Brahmas team that is kind of in a spot where they could get caught up slipping here. San Antonio is ranked number 2 against the pass, and obviously that is what Arlington loves to do. With quarterback Luis Perez under center, they love to throw the football. It is their bread and butter. He is not afraid to let it rip and push beyond 30, 35 passing attempts a game. San Antonio also number 1 in sacks this season with 24. However, Arlington's offensive line is pretty good, and with the way Luis Perez delivers the football, he gets it out quick, and it's led to them being the second lowest in sacks allowed this season with only 11. So it'll be a very interesting matchup as these two go head-to-head, which in the first time around, Luis Perez had himself a pretty solid game. I mean, he did go for 270 yards and a touchdown. It was simply just like the failures on third down and, you know, being unable to move the chains and finishing drives. They ended up going like 3 of 14 where they just could not finish these drives off and turn them into points. So the success was there for Luis Perez and Arlington through the air. If they can just finish off drives or at least just convert on third down, even like 2 or 3 more times to extend a drive or two, maybe the defense can hold on a little bit more, which they were pretty solid in that first matchup, and we'll get to that in a second. But on top of that, we maybe see some more points from Arlington and really threaten San Antonio here. Defensively, coming out of that game, that was arguably one of the best performances Arlington had all season long, points allowed aside. Intercepting Quentin Dormady 3 times in that matchup there. There was a lot of situations where San Antonio could have found themselves trailing, but again, those third downs and just failures to extend drives are really what bit them in the rear end over in Arlington. If they can stop the run this time around, which was an issue the first time these two teams matched up, as both Lovett and Ellison, the running backs for San Antonio, combined for a whopping 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. They averaged almost 10 yards per attempt at 9.6. If they can slow down the run and what San Antonio has been able to find on the ground, they have themselves a good opportunity to play upset here and maybe get another big victory. For the Brahmas, like I said, in a little bit of a dangerous spot right now as the offense has kind of fallen into a tailspin, and this team is missing Chase Garbers. Missing Chase Garbers. Quentin Dormady got benched last week, and while Kevin Hogan did come in, help spark some stuff for the offense and ultimately lead a comeback win, he damn near threw that game away with an interception to the sideline. If the corner didn't step out of bounds, that game is probably over, and they wind up losing that matchup here. So I will say, With some concern surrounding quarterback right now, I do think leaning into that run game, as Arlington does struggle with defending the run, as they've allowed the second most rushing yards per game this season. On top of that, averaging nearly 5 yards per attempt allowed on the ground every time a running back touches the football. Leaning into that run and just trying not to allow the football to go in the air too often to potentially get picked off another 3 times in this matchup might be a good idea. On the defensive side, San Antonio, I would say, probably needs to be better than the first time these two teams matched up defensively, just because of the issues we've seen from them on offense here. It wasn't like they were bad the first time these two teams matched up. They did manage a couple of sacks in that first game, but again, with where the offense is, 25 points isn't a lot, but it almost feels like it might be a little bit more than what this team could pull out if Arlington finds even more success defensively this time around. Again, they had the turnovers, they struggled against the run, but if Arlington's able to move the football more, there's a chance that 25-15 final score from that first matchup winds up being like a 25-24 or maybe like 26-25 Arlington's way. Like there was a lot of points left on the board by Arlington simply by not converting on third down and finishing off drives and taking advantage of the turnovers that they made. So I do think bringing some more pressure, trying to get the better of that offensive line and not allowing Luis Perez to get comfortable is going to be key for San Antonio coming away in this matchup here, even more so than the first time around when they played. But as for who I think is going to win here, I'm going to take a flyer on this one, and I've spent so much time thinking about this, but I think I'm going to take the Renegades. Something just feels right. Coming off that last week's win, I picked it, I called it, I was pumped to see it happen. San Antonio, like I said, in a bit of a tailspin right now offensively, and I'm legitimately concerned about how Quentin Dormady and or Kevin Hogan winds up looking in this game here after the first time these two teams matched up. You obviously can't bank on another 3 interceptions, but there was clearly something going on that Arlington figured out against San Antonio the first time, and I'll be curious to see if that kind of rolls over to this week as well. But it just feels right. It feels like the offense is really getting their footing in Arlington. Maybe the defense catches up a little bit this week against a very vulnerable San Antonio team. And I've got the Renegades stealing a victory and muddying up the Brahmas' outlook on the playoffs with a 20-18 victory. I think this one's going to be a kind of like a, gritting your teeth, clenching kind of game, coming down to the wire type of deal. But I think the Renegades play spoiler here. But those are my picks coming into week number 8. As always, I invite you all to comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on the matchups this week. Who do you think is going to win? If you're gambling, again, I don't gamble, but I love to hear what you all are doing. I envy the people that are willing to risk their money week in and week out. I am just not that type of person. I'm not built from that type of cloth or cut from that type of cloth. I do not like to just risk my money and potentially throw it away. So hats off to you all. If the gambling's going well, let me know. What do you guys have for bets this week? But that's it for me. As always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.